Welcome to Concept 7.2, the role of relationships for well-being. When it comes to relationships and well-being, the jury is no longer out. There is very clear evidence highlighting the key role that relationships play in people living happy and meaningful lives. Different disciplines or fields of knowledge, or sometimes we refer to them as the ologies, all agree on this. No matter what the knowledge tradition is, they all come up with the same conclusion. These different disciplines all agree then that well-being is not an individual state, but it's solidly situated in a social context. Hence, well-being is firmly grounded in relationships. In terms of sociology, Eckersley says we are deeply social beings and isolation exacts the highest price. So that sociologists interested in the social world say, relationships are important. In philosophy, we've got the Jewish philosopher Levinas, who says that we are called into being by other persons and we cannot become authentically human without them. We cannot become authentically human without other persons. So again, in philosophy, a very long tradition of signalling the importance of relationships for well-being. Let's take another one that's a bit more popular and a bit more current in some respects, neurobiology. So that ology suggests that knowledge tradition, or ology, suggests that our brains are wired for relationships and they're shaped by relationships for better or worse. And yet, despite that heavy emphasis on relationships and the social world in which we live in and the importance of that for our well-being, the pursuit of the good life is often deemed to be an individual pursuit, not a social or collective one. Eckersley talks further about the fact that being enmeshed in a web of relationships and interests give meaning to our lives. We are deeply social beings. The intimacy, belonging and support provided by close personal relationships seem to matter most, and as we've said previously, isolation exacts the highest price. But one of the things that we need to consider now is the way that young people do relationships in contemporary social settings. So very often those relationships are conducted via social media and via the internet and via all sorts of other means that are not necessarily face-to-face relationships. And as educators, we need to give close attention to the emerging evidence about how that impacts on well-being. Let's go back to our models that we had in the last concept. In both of the models that I put up for you then, you can see the place of relationships. They feature in every model that we identify. They may not always be called relationships, but they will certainly use language around belonging and connection and the kinds of things that are required for well-being that are connected with relationships. Relationships are also a key component of the individual's resource pool that we talked about before when they face challenges in their life, particularly in relation to their well-being. Those relationships are a really important resource that they're able to draw upon. So all the time we want you to be thinking, how might this get played out in the different education contexts in which you're going to work? Here's what we found in the wellbeing study that was conducted in primary and secondary school contexts, in those education contexts. When we asked about the relationships that are important to children and young people and support their wellbeing at school, this is what they told us. Parents and carers, siblings and extended family, close friends, teachers, other peers at school and in the community, other adult leaders, and other community members. And then there is the self as a relationship, one's relationship with self that influences well-being. So even though some of those relationships exist outside of school, the students felt that they impacted on their well-being at school as well. If we look again at the Australian Student Wellbeing Framework, we can see here too that words linked to relationship, such as connection, partnership, etc., are present in all of those elements of well-being, in relation to inclusion, in relation to student voice, partnerships and support. So the notion of relationships are woven throughout all of those elements of well-being. In fact, there is now a major body of literature pointing to the important role of relationships in enhancing well-being at school. For example, Patton talks about young people spend close to half their waking hours in school, and inevitably the quality of experiences with teachers and with peers in that setting will affect emotional well-being. Here at Southern Cross University, in one of our papers, we reported that students place emphasis on relationships as central to their well-being at school because it was so clear and so evident in this major study we've been talking about here in this unit. Olson talks about longitudinal research that shows social connectedness in adolescence is a better predictor of adult well-being than academic achievement. So we need to reflect on that a little bit. When we talk about happiness as an individual pursuit, that is, if I compete to achieve well academically, that I'll do well in life. And this longitudinal research really casts that in a different way and saying that social connectedness rather than academic achievement is a better predictor of well-being. Durlak says that well-being is linked to academic engagement in any case. So in 7.1 we looked at two key aspects of student well-being. You might remember we talked about the environmental or cultural conditions, that is creating the right conditions for young people to flourish. And the second is around supporting them to learn the skills they need to maintain that kind of sweet spot or the balance point for well-being for both for now and for the future. There is a little bit of a risk though that efforts around well-being in schools might focus in more on two, that is on building those skills, and overlook the significance of everyday relationships and routine actions that promote a sense of identity. I am, a sense of belonging, I have, and a sense of purpose, I can. In 7.3, we're going to look at which relationships at school matter most and what the key features of these relationships are.